Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and we are taking a look today at the debate for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Who would you rather have, Rasmus Sandin or Morgan Rielly? And the question may stem a little bit more than that, so we're taking a look at the two players and comparing them in today's video. So let's get right into it. There's a little bit of a situation in Toronto. Now, you may be looking at this like, well, why can't you keep both? Hold on a sec. So we have to get to that. So the first part we have to get to is what is the goal for the Maple Leafs right now? It's to win a Stanley Cup. Okay, right. That's true. Now the problem is you run into a situation where Morgan Rielly is a pending unrestricted free agent. He has one more year left on his contract, and next summer he will be due for an extension. And you look at the amount of money that's being thrown around for defensemen right now. We just saw what guys like Seth Jones got, what Miro Heiskanen, actually on the lower end of that tier, Zach Werenski, Miro Heiskanen, like I mentioned, and what we're going to see from guys like not Seth Jones, John Klingberg next summer. We're going to see some big contracts be giving out. And you can make the argument that a guy like Morgan Rielly in Toronto, a former 5th overall draft pick, could be in that same tier, and we'll get to there. So let's take a look at Rasmus Sandin first. So he's a 21-year-old defenseman picked 19th overall back in the 2018 NHL draft, which turned out to be a pretty good draft. And he's one of those defensemen. He's only played 2 real seasons in the NHL, and they're not full seasons. He's played very sparingly. He's played between he played 40, 50 games in the league? Not even. He's only played 37 NHL games. With that said, through 2 seasons, he averages out between 25 to 30 points per season. It's actually 27 points on a given season through his first 2 years. But again, he hasn't played a full season in the NHL, so those numbers are very weird. It may not be a real estimate to what he is, because you also have to remember this season, he only played in 9 games, but he did pick up 4 points, which does definitely boost his value in that regard, right? So in sparing numbers, he's actually played well. Now the thing is, he's going to ask for less money than a guy like Morgan Rielly, but he's still going to ask for a bridge deal to the point where if Morgan Rielly gets his money, you cannot give Sandin his money too. You can't have the best of both in that regard. So with that said, looking at Morgan Rielly, he's 27 years old, so he's a little bit older, absolutely. A 2012 first-round pick, 5th overall, right? He was a big draft pick for the Leafs back then. And he averages out over 500 NHL games, mind you, so a much larger sample size. He's a 40 to 45 point defenseman per year. He averages out 43 points per year. So obviously Morgan Rielly, in terms of points, will provide you a lot more value. But the question is, who is going to be better long term and in the now? You have to look at it maybe both in this situation, because the Leafs, if you sign Morgan Rielly, right, that may keep you from signing or keeping a guy in the bottom 6 for your depth up front, or maybe adding a depth defenseman who can start in your lineup. That could be the difference for Morgan Rielly or Rasmus Sandin. So it comes the question for the Leafs, which we know the mentality. It's be heavy up front and let your depth just kind of figure it out. And that hasn't really worked for the Leafs over their time in Toronto, and that's been Kyle Dubas's big thing. Now, if he continues with that story and he kind of sells out on that, we're going to see Morgan Rielly return and Rasmus Sandin walks. Now, he probably won't walk. They could trade him for either assets as a restricted free agent, which they probably won't get full value for, but still they could get something for him. And you keep Morgan Rielly, and you give him probably somewhere between $7 to $8.5 million. I don't think he's going to get any more than $8.5, but if he wants to use leverage, he could do that. Now, the question here is the mentality of Morgan Rielly. Is he willing to take a pay cut to stay in Toronto? Because you have to be honest, the argument isn't really there. I mean, you look at guys, in Toronto is a perfect example. Like, if I'm Morgan Rielly, I'm sitting there, I see John Tavares making 11. I see Austin Matthews making 10 point something, Marner making 10 point something. Nylander making much higher than his market value. You could make the argument with this season that maybe Nylander's making his market value. But other than that, the top three, it's like, well, they didn't take a pay cut, so why do I have to take a pay cut? And maybe that's not the mentality of Morgan Rielly. Maybe not. But you have to consider that. If I'm Morgan Rielly, I'm thinking, hey, they got their money. I want my money too. And that may not be there in Toronto now because those guys got their money. So unless Morgan Rielly really loves Toronto, he wants to take the pay cut, and he really wants to win a Stanley Cup in Toronto, he's not going to stay there. Now, let's just be completely honest. But he's kind of built up an attachment to Toronto, and maybe he sees it as, I want to win a cup here. I've spent a decade in Toronto. They drafted me a decade ago. We haven't had that success, but I really want a win. I want to taste that champagne in the cup here in Toronto. And if that's the case, he will sign long-term in Toronto for between 6.5 to maybe 7.2 max. But that's the real question. Is he going to go for the bag, and is he going to leave Toronto and leave everything he's known, or is he going to stay, take that pay cut? And I think that's really the big question with Morgan Rielly. We can't really go into his head to really figure out exactly what he wants to do, but going into this season, have that mentality. Now, with that said, now comes the question: who do you keep, Rasmus Sandin, or do you keep a guy like Morgan Rielly? Now, the problem is a guy like Timothy Liljegren hasn't really developed the way they had hoped. He was a 2019 15th overall draft pick. He really slid in that draft. He was projected to be a top 10, maybe even a top 5 draft pick, and he slid all the way to 15. And we are starting to see maybe why that happened. He just hasn't developed the way that maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs had hoped he would back in that draft class. So maybe there is a little bit more reliance on Rasmus Sandin kind of panning out, which he has done. And I think it's an interesting debate going into this year because the Leafs are going all in this year. There's no question they keep both this year. But with Morgan Rielly's contract coming up this year, it is going to raise the question of who stays, because you probably don't keep both of these players long term. So, my estimate, I think I'm going to sell out, and I'm going to keep Morgan Rielly as long as he wants to sign that extension long term. That's really what it comes down to. It's going to be a little bit in the hands of Morgan Rielly here because of the salary. They don't have the money to give him all the money he wants. But if Morgan Rielly says, listen, I'll sign here for $7.3 million. I want that money, but I'm going to take a pay cut to stay in Toronto. Give me 7.3, and I will live and die by the sword here. 6.3, $8 million, 8-year contract. You're going to get, because you're going to give me max term. If I'm going to take 7.3, 7.5, I want max term on this deal. So that's kind of the scenario. If you are Kyle Dubas in that situation, would you keep a guy like Morgan Rielly for maybe another 2 or 3 million more per year than Rasmus Sandin, who would be on a bridge deal? Or do you keep Rasmus Sandin, keep that extra $2, maybe $3 million, and get somebody else to add to the pipeline, add some more depth? Let me know what you guys think down below, but I'm going to go with keeping Morgan Rielly. I would keep Morgan Rielly, win the Stanley Cup now. You let go of Rasmus Sandin. As much as it hurts your future, you're trying to win a Stanley Cup right now. That's been the mentality for Toronto now for the past 2 years, and going into year 3, the Leafs have not won a playoff round, and they are going to be desperate. They need to keep a guy like Morgan Rielly around. So let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with me? Should they keep Morgan Rielly, keep the veteran leadership, the core of this team, or do you go in a different direction? You go with Rasmus Sandin, get all the assets you can for Rielly, and move on from there. Let me know your guys' thoughts down below. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys again next time.